Something happened, Olivia. Something happened while I was so focused on these birds. I, in a way, even though I didn't really realize it at the time, I entered their world. I really
Mm,
entered bird world. And in the way, I'm getting goosebumps even remembering this because right now I can go outside and walk and look at trees, but what I can't do is recreate where I was energetically when I was so immersed with these birds exactly in this way. I would sit outside or I would go outside and I would stand by where all the trees were. We had many trees in Texas. They were called live oak trees. They were really great. They had all these branches, not branches like this, they
mm,
were these snaky branches and they were really interesting trees and they were all over the place. I could look into a collection of trees and I could see all of the highways in them, the energetic roots through these trees, through individual trees, between trees. It was as visible to me as looking at an expressway and seeing an exit and a highway and all of this. And I could see these pathways, like absolutely see them. And it didn't happen right away. And it took many hours for me to be sitting there
mm.
looking and speaking with, not only mentally, but I would whistle to these birds so they knew where I was. Uh, and then I would see them arrive and then depart, and other birds come and go using these energetic corridors, right? And even today, I'll go outside and I'll look at the trees and I'll remember what that felt like, but I don't see them right now because I'm not
Mm.
doing that day after day after day after day. It was one of the most magical things I ever had happen to me. Hi, everybody. It's Candace Craw Goldman from quantumhealers.com, back again with another quantum conversation. And we are talking, once again, not our first time, with Olivia Sayward. She's in Berlin, Germany. She is a multi talented healer. And we're going to talk about earth based themes today. Hi, Olivia.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
I really enjoy speaking with you, and I am so glad that we are having another conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce the topic because that's kind of why we're here.
Yes, I feel like we're coming into a new chapter, and a couple years ago I would have a lot more sessions based around, the universe and galactic history, and then in the last year or so it's all been very, either this life or maybe a past life or lives kind of focused on connection to the earth. And one of the main pieces of advice that comes through the higher self, like basically with every single person, is that they need to spend more time in nature. And so I just thought that this would be a fun conversation to talk about. And I was just also curious to hear about your experiences and maybe even think about um, how we can even actively bring up the nature connection in sessions because I feel, obviously we're in a crazy time where the earth is going through as many changes as we are, and I think any time that we can help people feel more connected to the planet is like extremely important.
Agreed, agreed. And actually, while I was setting up for today's interview, I've thought about, I'm sure you've heard about it, so I'm going to go ahead and put you on the spot and ask you if you've had a session on this topic. I will go ahead and say I have not. I mean, nobody's asked the question, it hasn't come up naturally. But when you talk about the Earth going through a lot of changes, a lot of people are talking about the geomagnetic excursion. And I had this idea. I thought, I don't really recall anybody on our forum talking about it, or and
Mm.
maybe some of our colleagues have mentioned it, but I really haven't had any of that information come through any of my clients. Have you?
Maybe not particularly the storms, but I have had people who had like their role is to help stabilize the earth. I mean, a lot of us are doing that, but that clients who were kind of supposed to spend as much time in nature as possible and as slowly as possible, sometimes more slowly than they felt comfortable with.
Mhm, mhm.
So th there has been a theme that has come up a little bit of like earth stabilizers.
Very good. That matches some of my own experience. What I have had is some conversation around the global warming idea or the climate change idea. So I'll go ahead and ask you that. Have you had any sessions about that? Because that I have had people comment on. Have you had that? Not the excursion, not the
Mm.
geomagnetic thing, but something a little different, more specific.
I don't think specifically that. What has come up in repeatedly with like the higher self was kind of helping the person understand that the earth is going through her own processes. And so, in some regards, we don't need to worry about certain changes because it's just part of like her changing and upgrading and letting go of things as well.
Mhm,
So that has come in through like higher self answers, but I
mhm.
haven't had it come in like as the session journeying part kind of a topic.
Yeah, I don't know that I have as far as the session journeying topic either, but it's been, a topic of interest for the higher self, access to sort of some cosmic information. In general, I tend to, and for my whole time of practicing this work, whereas I know a lot of other people have a lot of cosmic information or a lot of, like our colleague Virginie, dragons all over the place. She's all about the dragons. It just very consistently in my own session work, people are all about their own lives.
Hmm.
And yes, some have very cool sessions with some interesting additional information, of course, but their extreme focus has been on their own life, which that's what Dolores had in mind when she started all of this, as a school to teach, right? As a technique to teach others to help the individual. If you go back before even that part for her, just to speak clearly about the history, she was all about lost knowledge, right? So she went from lost knowledge to let's help people, right? Okay, so let's leave that there. But actually, so what I have gotten in multiple sessions, and none of it has contradicted each other at all, is that yes, there's some climate adjustments going on. And then the very next sentence tends to be, as it's going on every other single planet in the solar system. So every
Mm.
planet in the solar system is going through a similar adjustment in their climate. So there's no way you're going to be able to blame any of that on people driving too many miles in their gas powered cars. What's happening on Mars or Pluto or Venus isn't because of our carbon footprint.
Right.
Yeah, so I found that really interesting. Yes, but as far as connection to the planet, the the advice about getting out into nature for me personally has been coming for quite a while, and even in well, frankly, in my own session with Dolores. So all the way back in 2008, my higher self said she needs to get out with her horses more. I mean, I have horses. They've been my lifelong, always passion and dream ever since I could form the first sentences out of my little mouth. I've pretty much had horses my whole life, but yes, I'm a type A workaholic. So a lot of that advice has been um, repeated for people for a very long time. However, because of the preponderance of devices and screens, I find that advice is ever more insistent, especially since COVID, and especially since the orchestrators, shall we say, wanted us inside, on screens, not connecting to each other, not walking in parks, not on the beach, not, none of that. Please stay home and don't breathe the air, don't have any sunshine, don't get together, and don't connect to the earth. Interesting, huh? That was a very obvious thing happening at the time in my world, and I think some people are
Mm,
agreeing with that idea right now that that was a plan all along. Disconnect
yeah.
from our power.
Yeah, I had a very profound session. I think it was maybe about a year ago or so, where I was like in a tribal kind of life. And this was in North America, so it was like the Europeans were coming and we had to keep on moving where we lived. Um, and my mental mind was asking myself like, okay, why doesn't this feel traumatic though? Like within this experience, because like this woman was still really relaxed, even though they had to keep on adjusting and moving, and this was like, and losing their lands and everything. But what came through was that there was so much nervous system regulation through being in nature the whole time that you weren't holding on to trauma and pain as much. It was like just by being outside all the time, like lying on a rock, walking through the forest, like the things weren't, issues and problems weren't sticking as much. And I found that kind of like, okay, now I get it. Now I understand. Um, and it makes sense. I had like a light bulb moment a couple weeks ago where I was walking in the forest and everyone, we get the advice through sessions like go in the forest, go outside, and it's like, yeah, that makes sense, but like why? But it's like as soon as we as a human walk into the forest, we become part of the ecosystem. And the forest is striving to find balance the whole time. So as soon as you're in it, the forest is also, balancing you out so you don't bring the whole ecosystem out of whack. Um, but yeah, that, get in nature is like every single session, every higher self is telling us to get outside more.
I think it's the Japanese that use the term forest bathing. I just love that, right? And I had a magical experience happen to me. Long time listeners or viewers of mine will know about my incredible fortune and magical, truly magical situation of I raised two birds, two wild birds that had just been hatched and shouldn't have survived. I mean, they literally were the size of a small marble. I had no idea what they were. Uh, there was three, and then one died quickly, and the other two, and I tried the mother, and none of that worked. And my parents, because we'd raised birds before, they were like, yeah, we've raised birds, but never just out of the egg little songbirds that are this big, never ever, for one reason, fledglings or, bigger ones that had gotten its start from their parents. These two little birds basically had the eggshells still stuck on them. I mean, they were that early born. And both of them were very pragmatic. And when I called them, this happened in Texas, and they said, "Oh, it's too bad. That's too bad. You're going to watch the other two die like the first one died. It's too bad." And I was still going to try, right? And I ended up um, raising these two birds. They lived. I mean, they shouldn't have. By all accounts, there was no reason they should. I pried their little mouths open with a toothpick and put little tiny bits of bird gruel in there, and they just kept living every day. I mean, for a good 2 weeks, they'd be there every morning when I woke up, and it was just this most miraculous thing that ever happened. And in the end, and it took quite a while to figure this out, but they were cardinals. They were cardinals, and then I didn't know for a while because juvenile cardinals are kind of brown. I didn't know if they were male or female, and they were two males. So they were bright red male cardinals that I raised. And here I will put a picture of me and those two cardinals right here when I edit this conversation. But there was something just so magical about raising these birds. But what I want to talk about briefly about being in their world, because I was their parent, right? They came to me for shelter, they came to me for food, they came to me for security. And of course, my job then was to get them independent so that they wouldn't need me. So in that time frame where I was getting them out of the house and practicing flying outside, but they would come back. You know, they would touch base all the time and they would land on me and they'd sleep inside, but then they'd go out the next day and all of those kinds of things while I made sure they knew how to feed themselves because I had done that before growing up. Something happened, Olivia. Something happened while I was so focused on these birds. I in a way, even though I didn't really realize it at the time, I entered their world. I really
Mm.
entered bird world. And in the way, I'm getting goosebumps even remembering this because right now I can go outside and walk and look at trees. But what I can't do is recreate where I was energetically when I was so immersed with these birds exactly in this way. I would sit outside or I would go outside and I would stand by where all the trees were. We had many trees in Texas. They were called live oak trees. They were really great. They had all these branches, not branches like this, you know. They
Mm.
were these snaky branches and they were really interesting trees and they were all over the place. I could look into a collection of trees and I could see all of the highways in them, the energetic roots through these trees, through individual trees, between trees. It was as visible to me as looking at an expressway and seeing an exit and a highway and all of this. And I could see these pathways, like absolutely see them. And it didn't happen right away. And it took many hours for me to be sitting there
Mm.
looking and speaking with, not only mentally, but I would whistle to these birds so they knew where I was. Uh, and then I would see them arrive and then depart, and other birds come and go using these energetic corridors, right? And even today, I'll go outside and I'll look at the trees and I'll remember what that felt like, but I don't see them right now because I'm not
Mm.
doing that day after day after day after day. It was one of the most magical things I ever had happen to me.
That's so cool. Oh yeah, the tree. I love how there have also been so many more books coming out about trees and tree energy. It also actually reminds me, I had a very short little segment in a session with someone once where she was like talking about how the trees are like the Earth's antenna, and they bring down the cosmic energy and they're the ones that are like, bringing it down and into the ground. And I was just like, what? Yeah, it's absolutely.
And their root network. Are you aware of they
Mm.
communicate just like the mycelium, which I know you want to talk about. But while we're on the topic of trees, let me share. Yes, I love the trees, and my dad was such a tree guy. Not mystically, but just straightforward. My my mother used to complain, all you care about's the trees, she would say, because he didn't care if the roof was, shingles were falling off of it, but he cared if his trees were happy and taken care of. Um, I had an intuitive session with someone. This was a little while back, but all of a sudden, and this is how my intuitive sessions work, I just talk with people, and then all of a sudden I'll get hit with things, and sometimes they seem like they're out of nowhere, right? So I'm talking to this woman, and she was asking me or telling me about her issue or whatever, and all of a sudden, she said something, and my question made no obvious sense, and I said, "Excuse me for this question, but do you have a favorite tree?" I mean, it just came because what happened in my mind was my favorite tree here on the farm just kept landing in my face while I'm talking to this woman. Just this tree, my tree. It's a big black walnut tree. And she said, "Well, that's interesting." She said, yes, I have a favorite tree. It's right outside my window, and I was sitting under it meditating before our session." And I said, "Wow, that's great." And then I said, and it was absolutely true, I said, "I think my tree wants to talk to your tree." And not even in a session, we kind of had an exploration like that, which was basically between the four of us, right? My tree, her tree, and us two together. It was amazing.
That's super cool. Yeah, I'm hoping for and looking forward to those kinds of things coming more, in the sessions, like kind of as I don't know, I guess it's like certain people don't have as many acute topics to deal with, that there might be more and more room for that kind of space of like developing our communication with animals and trees and plants and mushrooms and seeing where that takes us and how, there's a lot of interesting work at the moment too of like people creating new structures of like protecting the rights of, a river or giving it a title so that it can't be polluted too much. And so I think a lot of this work could also move in that direction of like us tuning in with our environments and figuring out like, okay, what do they need? How's the tree doing here? Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, our expanded awareness of all of the energies around us and then communicating. And isn't that interesting? Because if you think about it, and I'm sure you probably have heard this before, I know that I have, a lot of people who talk about exploring space, they mention this idea that we don't even know what's in our oceans. Not really. Our
Mm.
oceans are so vast, so deep, and so mysterious. There's so much about our own planet that is still so rich for discovery. And we absolutely have an opportunity, and I believe it's one of the reasons we're here. You know,
Mm.
if and when we are in the non-physical, we lose these very precious opportunities, or at least as directly as they can be manifest while we were in the physical, which, I'm all about. I am all about that, and I'm all about the communication. Tell me your where you are and what you're experiencing with the mushrooms.
Yeah, this year is all about the mushrooms for me. I mean, as a lot of people do, at some point you might take magic mushrooms and have interesting experiences that way. And that kind of opens the door to the whole mushroom kingdom being very fascinating. And so over the last year, I've been doing a lot of kind of small group meditations here in Berlin with people and doing guided meditations to connect to, a certain plant or a certain mushroom. And it's been very interesting and insightful because if you get like a group of, six, seven, eight, nine, 10 people together, and then share about the experience afterwards, then you can start noticing like how people picked up on the same things or they felt how, a certain plant or mushroom was moving through their body. And then it's like you could get this kind of like, yeah, bigger picture of what a plant's personality is or a mushroom's personality. And it's also been very interesting the difference between what the energy feels like. So with the plants, it's a lot softer. The communication is very subtle. And the people who tend to be drawn to the plants are like a lot more sensitive and a little bit quieter and need less stimulation in general. But then if you do like a mushroom meditation, then everyone's like giggling and like feeling very connected at the end. So that's been very.
Let me clarify something. Are you talking about simply addressing and communicating with the mushroom realm as a theory or while you're ingesting them or both? Because that's really interesting, don't you think, to do it with and then without, maybe.
For the most part, it hasn't nothing has been psychedelic. It's all just been like maybe a mushroom tincture of like a certain wild mushroom from the forest or tea from one of the plants. So it has been like connecting to it on a sensory level, but not nothing like hallucinogenic. It's all just been like guided meditation and then
Got it.
yeah.
Okay, that's fascinating. So the first thing I have to say, and I'm kind of laughing about it now, is growing up, my mother was German, so she used to say, "You sound like you've been eating crazy mushrooms," she used to say. And of course, I had to become much older before I realized that there was really something to that, that phrase. But our colleagues, Donna and Diana, Donna McMurtry and Diana Adair, they are good friends and they live in Colorado. And I'm going to take this moment to mention a couple different things. When we release this interview, the first webinar will already be done and in the can because it's happening on Monday, which is just a couple days from now. But the very next webinar we have, and I'm starting a few of these absolutely free webinars, Donna and Diana are actually going to be in the panelists for this webinar. And we're going to be talking about BQH and plant medicine. And
Mm,
one of the things that they are doing is they are holding an inaugural um, exploration with the use of um, plant medicine and BQH concepts because they discovered something really interesting, Olivia. So there are trained um, let's say psychologists, mental health professionals who are using, microdose, low dose kind of stuff, doing this kind of work, and they actually go through programs, right? This isn't just, go get something and experiment willy nilly. And they have been in conversation with some of these people who have had clients who've gone who've taken some of these substances for a variety of reasons, mental health, of course, being right up there. And here's what they said, and don't you just love it? They said they found that these people, very well intentioned and open minded, they didn't have the kind of skills that you and I have going into any BQH class, session, doing this consciousness exploration the way we do. These people who are really opening up the door, who are really expanding in a chemical way with people, are they don't have all of the language that we do. They don't have all of the context that we do. They don't have some of the history or some of the accepted protocols and approaches. And
mm,
so their first inaugural, we're calling it BQH Expansion. So basically, BQH to help people who work in that way uh, after they learn the baseline BQH, how to combine these two things. And Donna and Diana, they're going to be holding this webinar. It's going to be February 26th, which is a Thursday. Yes, February 26th, a Thursday. It's 5 p.m. Central Time. It's a free webinar. I'm looking forward to it myself. They're going to give us a little presentation, and then they're going to take questions, and we're hoping to have all kinds of people show up to find out what people are curious about. But we see these two things intersecting very naturally, and
Mm-hmm.
I think you're already doing some of that, and that's very exciting to talk about.
Yeah, it's definitely an area that I want to move into as well. Like, there's actually a kind of a research institute really close to my house here that are, they're kind of working on developing, um, yeah, clinical studies or like opportunities for people to have that medicine in a safe way. But I can definitely see and imagine how you know, there's some structures that are maybe a little bit too much in place to be able to like help people through these spaces that are really, um, yeah, can kind of go anywhere. And also, you need to have almost like a certain level of imagination to be able to like help someone through that, you know? Like if someone's in a sticky situation, you got to be able to sometimes even just make up help, and the help will show up, if it's angels or their guides or whatever.
Right.
But like there's almost like this skill or this tool that you need to grow of like being able to freestyle and kind of use your imagination to help the person still feel safe in kind of a very liminal realm. So, um, yeah, I look forward to seeing how the two areas kind of like intersect more and more and um yeah, it's exciting.
It's very exciting. I'm excited in a very basic way, which is I think it is so much the definition of what beyond quantum healing is, which is, hmm, look at that. Look how many people who are interested in the same or similar things are interested in helping people in all kinds of ways, opening up to new possibilities, new tools, new consciousness exploration pathways, right? And I can just see, this whole idea of mixing modalities, right? For the longest time when there was just Dolores and just QHHT, and it was 20 years ago or even 15 years ago, that was considered mucking up the waters. Basically, Dolores's approach, it was very pragmatic and it made sense for the time, which was stick to one thing. Stick to one thing. But because I was so involved with, even in Dolores's latter years, I was so involved with communicating with other practitioners, they just naturally gravitated to more tools in their toolbox because most of us love all of this work. We love all the different ways of understanding how sound is helpful, how different lights are helpful, or at least you have to pay attention to them, or how things like Wi Fi or electrical systems or smart uh, meters can muck up some things. I mean, we have to acknowledge the interference that's around us energetically, and we also are only smart if we open up our minds to the things that can help smooth all of this out for us. Why wouldn't we do that? Why would we be so narrow minded that we wouldn't look at all of the things in front of us? And that's not to mean to make every single session a smorgasbord of throwing everything at it, because that's also ridiculous, right? I mean, there's balance here. And I think that's where intuition comes in and discernment comes in and communication above all, right? Communication with your client about
Yeah.
what they expect, what they are will tolerate, what they're interested in, what they will allow. And if you ever, as a practitioner, have this idea, well, maybe I could or should do, and then fill in the blank. Well, please don't do that without discussing it with your client. You know, this isn't just a one-sided energy exchange.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also just important to meet people where they're at, you know? So I had a client recently where if I had just gone according to QHHT protocol, I might have taken her in spaces that she wasn't ready to go yet. Like she'd um had some experiences where she was brought into past life situations that she wasn't ready for and where the that practitioner didn't help her make sense of it enough. And so she was very wary. And so with, I don't know, the kind of widened tool belt, I could adjust the session so that she could enter into it in a more safe way and kind of have the control over how much she was willing to go further.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I also just agree. It's like the more tools, you know, nervous system support, this, that is better. And then once you've kind of also tried a lot of things, then you realize how simple it can be, you know?
Yeah.
At the end, it ends up getting very reduced, and you realize you don't actually need so many tools, but it's important to figure out what your like middle ground is.
Right. If all like it's that old saying, if all you have is a hammer, then everything's a nail. But if you've if you've got something else in front of you, you might want to reach for another tool. I have a favorite session I remember referencing. I think it was actually a QHHT proper session, and she just yeah, she just wasn't ready either. Nerves, extreme emotions. It didn't matter that we had a long preparation and a long exchange, and there was none of that mattered. When things started appearing before her eyes, she was not capable of sustaining any of it. And I remember just looking at her, and I just said, would you just, would you just like to sit up? And then, she wanted away from the bed and everything. And I sat her in my chair, and I said, can I give you some Reiki energy? This is the rescue position, and this position, my hands here will, help in this state that you find yourself in. And she instantly switched. And then, I mean, the whole session, which ended up being everything, was her sitting in that chair facing the other way, which was, I know, part of why she could then begin to talk about what was going on and all that with my hands like this. And then everything flowed, right? Everything was flowing because I was assisting her energetically. And at one point, and I don't know that I've done this before or since, Olivia, but I started singing to her. And I don't sing. I'm not a singer. I'm not talented in that way at all. The only time I sing is when I'm on my horse and nobody can hear me except for my horse. Um, it was what she needed because I followed, and she even told me that was one of the most beautiful sounds I'd ever heard. And even at the time, I remember thinking, well, it couldn't have been. But you know what? Maybe it was because of my support and our connection at the time. And it was exactly what she needed. And I followed my intuition. And it's one of my favorite session memories I ever had, right? And what if I would have forced her? I mean, and that was QHHT days. What if I would have sat her up and gave her some sort of, I don't know, more advice or whatever, and laid her back down and put her right back in the place that, she just ran from, screaming, kind of, it wasn't the best thing to do for her. And yeah. You mentioned something about elementals. I want you to tell me what you discovered in your session because I remember both Dolores talking about this and reading about it in her books, but she she kind of made it seem very, very rare. And just because it happened only the one time to Dolores, um, Dolores, bless her heart, she really, her approach was, well, what happens in my sessions or what happens in my sessions is the way it's going to happen in your sessions. That really was her approach. It was very straightforward. And because in her sessions, and this is really, really true, because in her sessions they started very basic past life stuff for a very long time before other things happened. Um, and then they progressed, right? Well, I mean, I have theories about that. That's partly because what she was ready for, partly because of what her energy quotient was interacting with whoever was there, right? If you're with somebody who can only ever even imagine and have room for thinking about past lives, something else may have an impossible time to even come through, right? But then after convoluted universe and after all this, those who came after, we were way open from the
Mm.
beginning or more earlier on certainly than her, but Dolores really never thought that. I remember multiple times in classes she would say, oh, but that's probably not going to happen for a while, because she imagined you're going to start out getting past lives. And very soon in these classes when the practice happened right there, which it didn't right away. I think it was 2011 before the practices actually started happening right there. She would just send people off before that time for people to do practice sessions after the class, right? Um, but she talked about an elemental spirit within the body of a human, and she was like, "Oh, it's just so rare. I'm sure you're never going to run across it, but you have."
Yeah, in I had a couple sessions where it wasn't so much elementals, but I had people connect to the elements.
Right.
So they had like a past life where they were really in tune with the elements and knew how to work with them, so knew how to work with wind or water or fire, or even kind of went on like an archetypical journey through the elements and like understanding what their energies were. And it was also very interesting because in one of them, the person got insight into like, oh yeah, you already have this element and this element, you actually need more wind. You need to go out and stand in the wind or, go stand near the ocean. So, um, yeah, that was just kind of interesting, like past lives that are connected to working with the elements, and then also this idea of each of us. Yeah, it wasn't only her either. There was another person too who also got that advice of like, oh yeah, you need to just go stand in the wind as often as possible. Or you need more sun exposure or more time swimming. Um yeah, so those were fun to witness.
That's fantastic. Can you bring back any stories about how they use the elements? I mean, were they healers in these other realms or other lives, or how'd that work?
The one person was it was like an experience where they were in a sandstorm, and so it was kind of like a very desert. It was very um like a desert situation, and it was almost like they were able to master the elements in that life because the elements were so strong, so the wind was very windy, and if it was just the sun, then it was extreme heat, and if they found water, then that was a big deal because of, lack of water otherwise. Um, So yeah, it was like being able to understand the elements like, from like this very like pure standpoint, just being by being in this like stark landscape and then being able to survive a windstorm because you could read, all of the energies and what they were going to do next. And then just knowing how to like hunker down in the sandstorm until it was done in like a peaceful way, like being complete peace in the middle of this storm. Yeah.
It almost sounds like a metaphor too. It sounds like very physical, but of course, very much like a metaphor, which, we're kind of used to that, right?
Yeah, I mean, some of those ones that were about elements, they also felt more like this might be just the most perfect story to get certain points across, you know? Like, so occasionally people will go through things where I'm like, I'm not completely sure that that's a past life, but we don't need to know. It
Exactly.
got the story across and it got the emotions across, and um I've had a question for you like in the back of my mind the whole time.
Okay.
Have you ever tried to work with your horses in healing work?
Yes. And it's interesting. Somebody just, Maddie Miller, if you're watching, thank you for sending me that. I have to respond to her. She sent me a little clip of somebody who says they put these horses into hypnosis. Is what she said. And so it's just a very short, it's like a YouTube short. This guy's standing in front of a horse and he's doing sort of this thing, and it's some energy manipulation. And I will say this, yes, I have. Uh, I've had many horses show up in sessions, personally for me when I'm exploring, but also direct energy kind of stuff, um, more direct physical, I'm out there with them, energy kind of Reiki type, that sort of thing. What I find has been an amplifier, and I'm so blessed about this, is I have a local vet who's a very popular, has a conventional, not holistic, not a naturopathic vet. She's got a conventional uh, veterinary practice, but she's still very, very open minded to a lot of things. She still uses some very conventional tools and has some conventional uh, procedures and concepts. But I find when she and I together, when we get together and something, right? Um, there's so many stories that we just have shared because um, because she's so open minded. And right now, my beautiful friend has she has this glorious collection of stories of things that have happened here on the farm that cannot happen, right? That as far as conventional medical uh, records, shall we say, cannot happen. And here's one. So my cat, his name's Odin. He's huge. He's kind of like a ragdoll Mancoon cat. He was just a barn kitten that I ended up bottle feeding, but he's this big, floppy, slow moving, regal, beautiful animal that I am absolutely in love with. He was naughty, and he ate two foam earplugs many years ago. This was 2011, 2012, 2013, something around there, many years ago.
Mhm.
Long story short, it took a while for us to figure out what was going on, because foam doesn't show up in an x-ray very well. It's not like it's metal, right? If you've seen x-rays, if it's bone or metal, something shows, but these were this foam stuff anyway. And it was positioned in a way that it like blocked a duct, and he was dying. uh, but we reevaluated, and we caught it in time where she opened him up from, she said, stem to stern. So she opened him up from here all the way down and removed the blockage, and he recovered. So then something interesting was happening because I was beside myself. I love a lot of animals, but this one is way up there on the top of just my heart, my whole heart being involved with this cat. And I was doing nonstop energy work, Reiki, leading up to the surgery and then after. And a few days after his surgery, so he had major surgery. It was not even a full 7 days. It was 6 days after major opened him up all the way through surgery. Uh, my vet came out to see my horse, and she had this nail puncture through her hoof, and it was a separate issue, but it had been enough time that she was coming back to check on the horse. Now, I'd been doing energy work with the horse as well. And when we started off with the horse, and I'll never forget it because she's picking up the horse and she's seeing because you could actually see where the hoof was breached with this nail, which also didn't make any sense because it came in from the top. And you couldn't, it's almost like somebody would have had to hold a nail there and beat it into from the top. Now, how does a horse manage that on their own? I'm not saying I even know how it happened, but it really looked like a nail hole, and well, there was something else that made it seem like it was. But she came out and she was looking at my horse who had recovered and was looking at where that hole was in relation to, because the hoof grows out just like a nail, just like a fingernail, right? So the hoof goes out. And she was like, but there's the hole. And I'm like, yeah. She goes, the hoof can't grow that fast. But it did. But it can't. But it did. But it can't. But it did. We were talking about all this energy stuff. And it was already so magnificent and so beautiful. And she was completely recovered. And we'd had other miracles out at the barn. And we were walking back to the house. And she said, well, how's Odin doing? I said, he's doing great. Why'd you come take a look at him? It's only been 6 days. They want you to do, minimum. Back then it was minimum 2 weeks, and then they removed stitches. They didn't even really use the dissolving outside stitches back then. They did inner dissolving, but not outer glue or dissolving stitches. And she's like, yeah, let me take a look at him. And I brought my cat out, and she's looking at his stitches. I'm like, they're healing really well, aren't they? She goes, this can't happen. I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, this is perfectly healed. There's hair growing here already. There's hair inside these stitches. This is crazy. It's not even been a week. How is this possible? And I'm like, well, I've been doing my Reiki. She's like, and she went to her truck and she got her scissors and her snips, to come and remove the stitches. And he was fine, and everything was fine. But what I didn't really realize was this, Olivia, which makes the best story. Her father was also a vet, right? It's one of the reasons she got into this. This was only like about her second year in practice. So she was new vet. And she, like, leaving with the truck and heading back into town, she calls, or her dad calls her. Somehow they're talking, and she's like, yeah, I took Odin's stitches out. And she got like in so much trouble from her dad. Like, he's like, are you crazy? His organs are going to fall out. That can't possibly be healed in that time. And just like and she was like, but it was. And he's like, but it can't. And she's like, but it was. And anyway, we have a few stories like that can't be, but they are. And so I think, yes, the gifts that the animals can bring us when we align and support them. And yes, so many messages. And I had a horse like the tree did. I had one of my horses come and give a message, just like the one tree sat in an intuitive session. I had a horse do that too. And I didn't even know it until the woman said, she also had a horse, right? All of a sudden my horse was there, and I'm like, I think my horse has something to say. I mean, and I'm doing it like this, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I love horses. I have a horse." I'm like, "Okay, well that's it. And then, um, yeah. So I think there are pathways in.
Hmm.
Sometimes when we think, do you have cats, or are you around cats at all?
I love cats. I haven't had my own in like since I was a teenager, but this year I did a lot of house sitting. So I've actually taken care of like 10 different cats this year. So I've had a good cat year.
See, I was following my intuition. I'm like, something about cats needs to come in here. Have you seen what they do when they look up and they look at something that's up? It's usually up, it's usually on the ceiling, and there's nothing that you can see up there, you know? I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
we were talking, I was at my mom's as well, and we kept on talking about how her one cat, Cosmo, was probably looking at portals in the corner or something. 'Cause yeah, they'd always do
Yeah.
that staring into the
Portals or spirits. And I had a cat who, very elderly, very health compromised, but lived to, gosh, I think he was 23. I mean, that's just crazy old for a cat. But he sometimes would walk around and he'd just come to a place and he'd just walk in a circle. And it seems like, neurologic and a problem, but we actually did an animal communication uh, with my friend Will and Allison about that. And that was about portal positions and not having any or having the filters become irrelevant anymore. It's almost like an approved interface between cats and people, but he was so old and so close to leaving that he was allowed to, I'll just circle this portal over here.
Yeah, I learned a lot from the cats this year, like getting to see so many different ones. A lot about also just like safety and like nervous systems and stuff from the cats this year. One of the cats that I was watching, I helped him figure out the cat flap because he was afraid of it before, and it was kind of like, figuring it out step by tiny step, kind of little wins. I think it helped me, or it's helping me with clients too, in a funny way. It's just like witnessing all the different cat personalities and how they kind of maneuver in space and each also need their own, approach or their own things that make them feel safe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're so different in personality, and some can be so smart, and others can just not be as smart. I mean, I've got a female cat in my barn right now with a kitten, and I'm just hoping against hope she's not pregnant yet. And there was a tomcat hanging around, and I pretty easily trapped him right away. Thank goodness, and my beautiful vet let me bring him right in, get him neutered right away, got his ear tipped right away, took care of him. Thank goodness. I had that trap out. I've been trying to trap the mother. She's just too smart. She's just too smart. And what's really fascinating is the kitten she's got with her. She somehow is teaching that kitten also. Doesn't matter that there's food in there. You're not going in there. And I mean, I tried camouflaging it. There's a fluffy blanket in there. I've got hay over it. It's supposed to look like just a space in the hay bales. Oh no, 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 no. It's just she's just too smart. But that tomcat just right in there, no problem. Walked right in and yay, because maybe I'll keep him from creating even more because I've got one making noise right over there right now. I don't know if you can hear her. She's like, "You're talking about us."
Just barely, yeah.
Yeah, she's funny. This one, the one who's over there, she showed up. She has no teeth. No teeth. Showed up, no teeth, and pregnant. And yeah, I don't know. My vet says they sure know how to find you. And I'm like, I've been trying to talk to the cat collective going, okay, enough, enough. I have plenty here. I don't need to do it anymore, but they kind of just keep coming. And it's kind of funny and kind of not funny because it's expensive and there's a lot of heartache that has wrapped up in it with the dramas and the medical situations that can happen. But I'm doing the best I can, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I am sure I wouldn't have this if I was living in town somewhere. And that kind of has us circling all the way back to the first part of our conversation, which is, um, how in sessions we are being brought back more and more and more to nature. And my observation about the events of 2020 and maybe events that they would like to repeat about that is to keep us in these real, well, let's face it, they're very, very urban centers where there may be parks and things like that, but you don't go forest bathing typically the minute you step outside your apartment if you're living in a larger city. So people in cities can connect to nature absolutely in a lot of different ways, but it's not as immediate as it is for somebody like me who doesn't have to do anything more than open up a door and head out. And I think we have to remember something that you said, that we become a part. We become a part of the earth when we interact with its elements. We are made of the same elements. And we really need some of the balance that she offers. And too many of us are too invested in the stories and the screens, aren't we, Olivia?
Yeah, and I mean, I think I've seen it in a couple people's like either sessions that they shared with or channelings that like the Earth actually is already further along already than us, and the animals as well. And it's like now it's just the humans that need to catch up and um the humans in cities even more so. Yeah. I don't find it super easy to be in a big city anymore, and I feel like everyone's gotten more sensitive and is more aware of that
Mhm.
and is like kind of looking for alternatives or realizing that they need to move out into more rural spaces, but yeah, we're still kind of at the beginning of that.
But you're already doing it. I see the plant, there to the right of you. I mean, you can bring some nature in. And I remember Emoto in a listening. I'll never call it a channeling, but a listening to Emoto. He was like, you can put water in bowls, in your house. You don't, you may not be able to walk out to the ocean or a creek or a lake or whatever, but you do, most of you have immediate access to water. And I think that kind of brings me back to cats. With all of your cat sitting, do you ever see them do this? Because my Odin is the best about it. Um, we have a big thing of water that I sometimes empty and refresh more than once a day because I have so many animals. But he'll go over to it in the kitchen and he'll get it going, he'll get that water moving. And cats like the moving water, I think, for energetic reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, I think their distrust of still water is probably healthy.
Agreed. Agreed. We used to have a cat named Diane, and she had her own water that was kind of elevated, but we had a dog or two. And she would go get little bits of things that she would find on the floor, and she would just go put them in that water. She never put it in her own water. She just deposited these little bits and pieces of things she would find, twist ties or a little piece of paper or a paper clip or whatever. She'd just go toss it in the dog water. Ah, you know, I used to talk to my kids about this. I used to say, uh, because a lot of people, even back then, and I'm talking the mid '90s, people were kind of hooked on televisions and I remember saying it and even saying it to them now that I'm a grandmother and they have their own children. The animals were so much part of our entertainment. We'd just sit on the kitchen floor and watch some of it's like, everybody who's ever drawn a fantastic and funny cartoon must have had cats and dogs because and that's why so many cartoons are cats and dogs, right? They're
Yeah.
all doing the cat and dog thing. But yeah, I can't even imagine living without the creatures in my life. Olivia, thank you for your time today. This has been quite lovely catching up with you. And yeah, so White Rabbit, right? White Rabbit Journeys. You can still
Yeah.
find Olivia there. Why don't you go ahead and say your website, and I'll put it down below too.
Yeah, it's just www.whiterabbitjourneys.com.
I remember.
Yes, you did.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Well,
and I'm also on Instagram. There I'm Olivia Sayward dot holistic. But yeah,
fantastic. Fantastic.
but
Well,
we'll see how long Instagram is still around.
ooh, there's a hidden message there. Okay, so yeah, so take if you're anywhere in Berlin, if you met Hara Katsiki, have you? Fantastic. I knew you
Yeah.
guys would get along. I could just see you two guys having a coffee somewhere. Fantastic.
Yeah,
All
I had my
right.
first session with her.
I think you might have told me that, and I'm sorry that didn't come immediately to mind. My apologies. And to you, Hara. Where are you, Hara? I haven't heard from you in a while. So, anyway, nice to speak with you. All right, so let's see. I'm going to make a couple announcements here before leaving for those who've stuck around this far, and I probably will put something at the very beginning as well at some point. But we are having the BQH immersion course. The BQH immersion course is for people who've gone through the BQH online course already and are interested in some, exchanges and a retreat style kind of gathering. A small number of people here in Kansas. That happens May 31st to June 5th this year. Again, the webinar with Don McMurtry and Diana Adair will be February 26th, which is Thursday at 5 p.m. I'll put the registration link below there. And that's about all I got for today. So until next time, if you are a practitioner of alternative health or energetic potential, please consider come joining us at quantumhealers.com. We'd love to have you. And if you're looking for anybody to have these wonderful sessions with or to help you out in any kind of way, even like those intuitive ways or dream analysis, which is something I have been offering lately, head on over to quantumhealers.com. You'll find the perfect practitioner for you. All right. Thanks. And see you next time. Bye, everybody.